KCF Technologies presents Industrial Transformation, Stories of Failure and Success from the Front Lines of American Manufacturing.
Welcome to the Industrial Transformation Podcast. We will be discussing stories of failure and success from the front lines of American manufacturing. I'm Marty Wolf, and with me today is the host of the Industrial Transformation Podcast, Jeremy Frank. Jeremy is the CEO of KCF Technologies. Hello again, Jeremy. How are you today?
Hello, Marty. Good morning. Great to talk with you again.
Yeah, we have a couple of announcements we'll get to in a minute, but let's start this way, Jeremy. Our professional relationship started probably a couple months ago, or maybe longer. I'm not sure. We're having so much fun. It started when you came on my Business Builders show, because I was fascinated by the work that you're doing, relating to American manufacturing, the sensors that you are using, and your study of American manufacturing and actually worldwide manufacturing. I wanted to tell you that story on the Business Builders show, and I guess that's led to some other new things, huh, Jeremy?
Definitely. Well, what it led to is us realizing that we've just got some pretty interesting stories that we can get out there in front of people that I think are kind of surprising but very useful in terms of how to improve industry and manufacturing and transform into kind of the future state. So yeah, I really appreciate having gotten to know you as part of your show, and then now we've got this thing off and running.
Yeah, and thank you so much. You're part of the Business Builders Media platform or network that we are adding new people to that. And what Business Builders Media is all about is giving entrepreneurs and business leaders the tools they need to have their voices heard. Because we learned over the years, Jeremy, there's so many business leaders and CEOs who want to do what you are doing, but kind of needed some guidance. So thank you for being part of that platform. We really appreciate that.
Yeah, glad to. And thanks for getting me off the ground doing this, Marty. I appreciate the effort. And yeah, there are just so many stories to be told, but ours, this story of industrial transformation, what I'm quickly realizing is there are just people coming out of the woodwork with their stories that are willing and interested to share, because it's just really important, critical stuff for people to know about, particularly people that are in the industrial landscape.
Yeah, absolutely. So to make sure we're clear with your audience, is that the next podcast, I won't be saying I'm with Jeremy Frank. I guess you'll be flying solo starting soon, correct?
That's right. Yep, we're off and running, and I appreciate the starter, and we're going to take it from here.
That's great. So, well, kind of speaking of taking it from here, why don't you take it from here? I guess you have a guest, and let's start talking.
Will do. So our guest this morning is Adam Dalo, and Adam is actually with KCF now, but has spent quite a few roles after a mechanical engineering degree from Penn State, has spent a good bit of time working in the power generation industry, and specifically in some nuclear generating facilities. In addition to that, he spent some time, which is particularly interesting to me, in working in a family business in the food industry. So let me just say welcome, Adam.
Hey, Jeremy. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, as am I. I'm really just interested. I want to dive right in because you've been doing some really fascinating things with our company, but you also have this extremely relevant background in the context of the first two interviews we've had, from the nuclear industry specifically. I want to just dive right in and talk about sort of the problem that's out there, the problem that we're addressing and you're aware of, and maybe I'd start with just, I don't know, safety or machine failures. Can you just tell our listeners something about what you've seen in your career in industry, in the power gen industry, maybe specifically things that affect machine failures and safety? What's going on out there?
Sure, absolutely. So safety is a great place to start with any industry, but particularly for the nuclear industry. Safety is such a key parameter. They really live that culture of safety as being the number one priority. It's something that's just drilled into you as a nuclear power plant worker. Safety is something that's discussed every single day. Even to this day, it's funny. Every time I walk up and down a set of stairs, I always grab the handrail because it's drilled into you, even down to that level of walking up and down the stairs, maintaining those points of contact and grabbing the handrails. And so safety is really just something that's a huge focus in the industry. And so I'll just give a little bit of background on what I did in the industry. So, like you mentioned, my degree is in mechanical engineering, and I worked for a little over 5 years at a nuclear power plant in the design engineering department. And so I did mechanical system design. Anytime something needed to be changed in the plant, I was doing all the paperwork and the design work and the justification, which is quite a big process in the nuclear industry, which I'm sure we'll talk about. So I have quite a bit of experience working in the industry, and just some things that I've seen in working in that industry related to safety. It's like anything else, any other industry. There's large rotating equipment, right? So there's turbine generators and big pumps and big fans, and so that's always there's always an inherent danger with any manufacturing or industrial setting. And one story in particular that I could share with you, the plant that I worked at, we had an issue with our turbine. Our turbine blades were actually cracking. So they were, every time we shut down to do an outage, they would inspect the turbine blades, and they were finding these little, micro fractures in the blades. And that's presenting a really big issue, both in terms of generation, but also in safety. There's stories out there, these large turbines, picture a big rotor with blades that are the size of a person, and it's the length of like half a football field. And so this is a really big piece of equipment, and when those blades fail, oftentimes it's not good. So there's actually been stories out there of blades being thrown from the turbine, and they wind up in the parking lot. And that could have happened in any power generation, anything with large rotating equipment. It's not unique to nuclear, but also there have been specific events in the nuclear industry where a blade gets thrown and it damages a bunch of equipment, and you're just lucky if no one is hurt by that. And so in our case in particular, we actually used vibration monitoring technology. We outfitted our turbine with vibration monitoring system, and we used that in order to identify when a crack would start and how it would progress over time, so that we could safely plan to shut down and swap out those blades. And ultimately, we were able to do some design work, almost like an optimization project like we like to do here at KCF. We took all that data and we did some redesigns to the turbine to prevent that cracking from occurring to begin with. So, that's just a one case scenario where using technology can help create a safer work environment. But of course, there's also just simpler, more simple aspects of it. Using like a wireless vibration monitoring sensor, or asset health sensors. You could eliminate a worker's need to go out and take regular, monthly rounds. Some of our customers in the nuclear industry have used these sensors to eliminate the need to build scaffolding up on these huge pump and motor systems, like a vertical motor where you need to build a scaffold to get up to the bearings, and they've eliminated the need for someone to go up and work at heights in order to take those readings. And so just the cost of building that scaffold and the risk of going up there and doing that work is totally eliminated. And now you have continuous data. So there's a lot of great examples out there for increasing safety.
Yeah, so there's so many aspects to that, Adam. It's fascinating. I mean, you picture a machine failure. A blade is just one example, but a blade the size of a person, like enough energy. I'm just picturing as an engineer also how much energy must be in that piece of metal to go through everything between that and the parking lot. I think it's hard for non-engineers or even for engineers to imagine, and yet modern life is not possible without these kinds of machines. So it's not like you can increase safety by not operating these machines. You just have to find ways to do these things safely. So I would ask, so you've done these things, long prior to getting involved with our company. What are you seeing now? Like, what is possible? Kind of what are some of the? I mean, I know you've been all over the country. You've been in all kinds of different factories. What are some of the things that you've seen that people would find fascinating about how you can actually address these issues?
Sure. Yeah. So like you mentioned, I've been in my time working with KCF, I've kind of been all over the country, and I've visited many different industries and many different facilities, and primarily in the timber industry. I've done a lot of work with our company. So that's lumber and plywood sites, paper manufacturing sites, and they're a lot different than working in a nuclear plant, but there's a lot of similarities as well. And one of the interesting things about those industries is that we've had some customers that have really embraced this IoT technology, and they are installing these asset health monitoring systems across their entire plant. And so, you would think that obviously we start with the most critical equipment, but they've seen so much value in doing that we've expanded that to their entire facility. And, a safety incident can occur on a piece of equipment that you may not think it's critical to the operation, but it is critical to safety, and it has downstream effects. So I've really seen some customers in various different industries just embrace this and apply it across their entire facility, which is pretty cool to see.
Yeah, it's really fun. It's just been fun to watch you work and grow into the role that you're in, because we study this, or it has been studied, and we've read the studies. The dramatic failure is the one that's the exciting story, but so often it's slips and trips and falls that cause people to get hurt. And it might be just a pump leaking oil or water onto a floor, and someone slips on it while they're hurrying to do maintenance on a failed piece of equipment. So it's just the pervasive coverage, I think, is really what I've seen you and your team pull off. Take me back for a minute, if we can, to power gen and the nuclear plants specifically. We talked with Westinghouse and with Ameren, with Jason and Lauren, about how this stuff can impact the way they operate. And I know a big part of any plant, but especially a nuclear plant, is outage planning and being able to get ahead of what's coming with your machinery. Can you talk a little bit about putting this stuff all together? Like, if you could go back in time and have access to what you now know you're doing, how would it affect your ability to do condition-based maintenance and get over some of the hurdles?
Yeah, absolutely. So outage work and outage planning is just a huge portion of the business in power generation and nuclear. And so in order to really have an efficient and effective outage, each unit shuts down on a continuous cycle. So whether it's 18 months or it's 12 months, there's a cycle in which each one of these units shuts down for refuel and for maintenance. And in the past, really the standard of the industry was to perform time-based maintenance, especially on critical components in the plant. So, whether it's every cycle or every other cycle, you need to plan to do maintenance on these pieces of equipment. And like I said, it's primarily been time-based. But as we move forward and the industry continues to evolve and adopt best practices from other industries, they're really starting to move towards more condition-based maintenance, and utilizing IoT technology to have real-time asset health data will only help to be able to better plan and have the right parts on hand. If you need to replace this bearing, if you need to swap out this motor ahead of time, and you can get those parts, and you don't need to keep a huge inventory of all these things. You can order them when you need them, and you work on the right equipment at the right time. And you also know what equipment you don't need to work on at that time, because there's a lot of cost and time associated with working on equipment just on a time-based interval when really, that asset might be perfectly healthy. And so just to have that information going into an outage is just huge, and it really helps to make it more efficient and get back to operating and generating electricity a lot faster.
Is there any way, I mean, I'm putting you on the spot, but if you were to estimate how much of that maintenance is not necessary, because so much of that drives the how many workers have to be there to be taking care of the machinery. But if you're doing things that aren't necessary, you actually might make the equipment less healthy. But you're also, it's kind of the classic "if it ain't broke, don't fix it" thing. How, like, what do you think? Can you share for our listeners what you think is typical?
Sure. Yeah, I've heard some pretty large estimates in terms of time percentages spent for a maintenance department. Even up to like 80% of a maintenance department's time is working on just time-based PM intervals. And so it's really a large chunk of their time could be doing work that maybe doesn't necessarily need to be done, at that time. And so having the information to know when you need to work on things, because the goal is not to eliminate work. The goal is really just to work on the right things and at the right times and with the right people. So yeah, I'd say there's a large percentage of time being spent on time-based maintenance.
Yeah, I love that. I might even ask you to elaborate on that a bit more because you're in the same kind of game I am now, where we're kind of going out trying to solve problems, leveraging technology, but also getting hand in hand doing it. Oftentimes, people push back at first and say, "Wait a minute, this will take my job." But once you realize that your current job is actually 80 or even 90% of your time is spent chasing problems that are the wrong thing, when you flip the script and you're using almost all of your time to do productive things, and your plant is operating better, I mean, it's a positive thing. Like, what have you've seen this? I mean, you've seen this on the front lines. Can you give a story or two of working with people and how you actually see them flip that script?
hmm Yeah, sure. That's always a concern. When we come into a facility and we're going to be installing all these sensors and these asset health monitoring systems, there's always a little bit of concern from the people who are, the vibe techs and the reliability engineers who are, they're going about their daily job, taking routes and using these manual processes, and it always creates a little bit of concern. Are they coming to? Am I being replaced with a sensor, right? And what I've seen actually take place is it really just helps to elevate those workers into, they're not spending their time walking around taking manual readings and working on just time-based intervals. They're working much more efficient and elevating their knowledge base and performing their tasks in a new way, in a more exciting way. And it really has helped to elevate individuals within these companies into higher roles, higher paying roles, more interesting roles. And so we're really just helping to elevate those workers rather than replace them.
Yeah, I love that. I think that's something that, in the IIoT and Industry 4.0 being the buzz that it is, people focus. I mean, not us, but so many people in the technology world focus on the technology. When you really do it right, it's not the way it works, is it?
That's right. That's right. Yeah, it's really just a tool to elevate people, and nothing is going to take place on its own. We work towards automation, but people are still just a huge piece of that puzzle.
Yeah, I love it. I'm going back to something you said a little bit earlier, and I'd like to hear you describe it. So you're talking about some of these, inaccessible areas, climbing up scaffolding, ladders, and I mean, these are places where unless someone's a daredevil, nobody wants to go, right? Nobody wants to spend their workday climbing, scaffolding ladders way up high to reach and get access to these machines. There's there are just machines in high places, but then there's also machines that are fundamentally working at heights like cranes. Um, can you describe that in a little bit more detail? Like what does someone have to do in order to do like a preventive maintenance measure or a check that's way up high that can be in a kind of a dangerous, challenging situation? And then how does that compare if you're able to leverage technology to help you do your job more effectively?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. In every industry, there are locations that you just don't want to spend a lot of time. So whether that's working at heights and needing to utilize fall protection or scaffolding, or it's working in a lockout tagout area where you need to control, energy sources and lock out a piece of equipment from, pressure and process fluid and electricity, that presents a risk every time you're working on that equipment. And in order to ensure that you're doing that work safely, there's just a lot of processes that you need to go through, and a lot of checks and balances. So specifically in the nuclear industry, when you have a work order that requires working at heights using fall protection, lockout, tagout, confined space is another one. It requires more people, more time, more paperwork, and essentially that's more cost. And so if you can replace all that potentially dangerous work with a sensor that's just going to provide you data that you can look at, on your computer in the office or even, at home. There's a lot of people working from home right now, and you could see what's going on with that equipment without having to put yourself at risk. I mean, that's a huge benefit.
Yeah, it's a pretty amazing dynamic. I mean, this whole COVID crisis, we've been talking about that, and in fact, that's part of why we started this interview series off in the power gen industry, because I consider it to be the most essential of the many essential industries that support our lives. Can you share a story? Have you actually seen this? Have you been anytime recently? Actually, I mean, maybe not. You don't have to name the customer or the factory, but where you've got people working from home and they're actually getting insights into the critical machines that they care for in a way that they wouldn't normally be, or without the technology they wouldn't be able to.
Yeah, absolutely. With a lot of our customers, we've been in very close communication with them throughout this whole, COVID crisis, and really trying to help them and just, see what they need. And the really interesting thing, a lot of them, like us, I'm working from home. A lot of people within our company are working from home. Well, so are they. And it's even less of a normal thing for them. I'm used to being on the road and working from all over the country. These people are used to being in their facility every single day. And when they're told that they need to do their job from home, that obviously creates a lot of challenges because they can't just walk out to a piece of equipment and, feel it, touch it, smell it, see what's going on. And essentially they're able to do that just by, logging into their smart diagnostics account, and they could get a sense of what's going on with their equipment from the comfort of their own home. And so they've really embraced that. And I think it's really helped just continue to operate safely and efficiently and create all the products that we need. We still need power. We still need all these products that are coming out. So it's really helped to facilitate that.
Yeah, that also makes me think about something that we think about a lot, and all industrial corporations think about the aging workforce challenges. I really first started hearing of this 5 to 10 years ago, and now it's just upon us that a lot of the real gurus of industrial manufacturing and utilities are nearing or at retirement age. And it's just wild. Just as we talk, you think about this whole COVID crisis. Those are the same people that are the most vulnerable, and therefore would I would assume would want to work remotely if at all possible, and the organizations would want that. But then on top of that, you take these inaccessible areas where you've got to do lockout, tag out, and you've got to climb up to a height. I mean, all those things are just creating real challenges for those workers to maintain continuity. Yet you can't operate without these machines, and those blades on the turbines are still going to be vulnerable to failure, as is the pumps and the fans. So what do you do? What have you seen that really addresses those aging workforce issues and knowledge transfer? I mean, you're a relatively young engineer still, relative to me anyway, and certainly relative to a lot of the real gurus. Do you see positive change in terms of addressing the workforce issues, and if so, how?
Yeah, absolutely. It's definitely an issue in all industries. Nuclear, it was a big issue, just having a lot of people close to retirement age. And, there's a big gap. So we had around when I graduated college, we had a lot of young engineers coming in, but we also just had a whole lot of engineers and maintenance and operations folks who were close to retirement. And so knowledge transfer becomes a big concern. And I think utilizing these new technologies really, it helps to facilitate that knowledge transfer, because you're getting insights into this equipment that, these seasoned veterans, they have the most inside knowledge of how this equipment works. But it's a lot of times it's in their head, right? And so they can walk up to a pump and they just, oh, that pump's acting funny today. Well, how do you know that? Well, it sounds like this, or it smells like this, or I could just feel it. And it's really hard to transfer that knowledge to a new engineer because you just don't have those years of experience. But now when you put actual data out in front of you, and the seasoned veteran can look at that data with a new engineer, and they could describe, well, oh, okay, well, this elevation in the trend, when we were out there and we heard this is what that's corresponding to. And so I really just think that it just helps to facilitate that knowledge transfer and just make the workforce more efficient overall.
How have you found people to be? I mean, I genuinely don't know a lot of the eaters because there's so many interactions. I mean, you've been in dozens, I guess hundreds probably of these factories and utilities. How is it when they connect the dots? I mean, so you're talking to one of these, real gurus, the industrial gurus that know the machinery, they can feel it. But then you sort of confront them or present them with this information coming from the new technology. Have you seen instances where they just are opposed and don't even want to touch it because they know their way? Or on the flip side, have you seen times where they embrace it and it really connects the dots and they realize that it's a way to transfer that knowledge and accomplish the goal more effectively?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've absolutely seen both of those cases. Yep, I've seen both of those cases. And, a lot of times we present this data to someone who's been working in the industry for a long time. And I've seen cases where they say, oh, that makes perfect sense. That aligns exactly with what I thought was going on, but I just never had the data to support it. And I've also seen instances where they say, oh, that can't be true. We've been running this way for 30 years and we've never had an issue. And so in both of those cases, I think just coming to the table with the data and working with that customer to really just try and stick to the facts and point them in the direction of why we're coming to these conclusions really helps to just get them on board and work with us. And over time, even when we've had challenges in getting someone to embrace the technology or embrace the change, we can win them over just based on experiences that we're able to provide to them. So, once we get a couple wins and we're able to prove that the data is real and it's meaningful and it actually does support what they have been seeing over the long term, then we're really able to get them on board and embrace that change.
Can you give an example? Just it's I guess we'll start running up on our time here soon, but the successes are interesting to talk about, but I think the failures are even more compelling just because it's the real deal. Again, putting you on the spot, but without naming anyone or describing them in a way that they know who you're talking about, can you tell me the story of a time when you just haven't been able to convince someone, where you just had someone who was really obstinate and you knew what the information was telling and our team knew, but they just wouldn't come around? Like, what is that like?
Sure. Yeah, that definitely, it happens. You don't win every time. And sometimes you just need to, like I said, you stick to the facts. You don't want to get emotional about it. But, if we're just not able to get someone on board, then, it is what it is. But, you mentioned failures. Actually, sometimes a failure is something that can spur action and actually create a positive change. And so what I have seen with people who are not really willing to embrace the change, a failure actually occurs, with their piece of equipment, and then we have data on it, or we're able to say, hey, if you don't want this to happen again, let's start to work together. And that really opens them up. Sometimes it just takes a negative event to occur in order to spur some action and spur some change. So I've seen it work in that way as well.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I mean, it is just sort of the karma or the yin and yang of life, that the failure actually leads to helping to achieve the objective. That's wild. Well, I would there's a couple questions I would like to wrap these up with, Adam, and it actually that actually leads into the first one really nicely, but more broadly. So you've been in the nuclear industry, you've been in a family business in food manufacturing, you've been driving technology now in a technology company for a couple of years, and you're solving problems. From what you've seen in your career as an engineer, what do you think is the biggest problem? Like, what's the one that just really drives you crazy, that if you could just snap your fingers and make it go away, you would?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, just working with blind spots, in every single industry, there's just, you don't know what you don't know sometimes, and everyone's just working to do their best. And there's always going to be a blind spot. And I think, operating under those blind spots causes things like safety issues. It causes downtime and it causes inefficiencies. And working to eliminate those blind spots is really, I think, the key to evolving, all of our industries in order to eliminate those problems.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I just, you see it everywhere. There's just people. It's hard to start addressing a problem when you don't know that it's there. I think that's a great one to identify. I like to think of it. It's like if you had a bunch of issues in your cellar, leaky pipes and broken glass on the floor and the doors falling off the hinges. But if the lights are off, you don't really know about any of those problems. So you trip on the rake and it hits you in the face or whatever. But as soon as you turn the lights on and you're aware of it, then it's easy to deal with it. So it is, yeah, blind spots are chronic. Take me to the positive side. So, you go out, think into the future, like 10 years or however far the future is. What do you think it can be like? So you're seeing sort of this new capability. You're on the tip of the spear of change. What do you actually think is possible when you look at the challenges, but you look at the opportunity to solve those challenges? Where do you think we can be in 10 years or so?
Yeah, just based on my experience so far working, in this industry and deploying these technologies, it's so promising, and I really like to just align myself with our company values and goals. And I really do believe that, in the next 10 years or so, we could get to the point where in these manufacturing facilities, industrial facilities, we can eliminate injuries, so zero injuries. We can eliminate unexpected failures, and we could eliminate unnecessary waste. And so we're really just creating a much better work environment for the people who work at these facilities. They're more efficient, they're more profitable, so we're bolstering the economy in these areas, and we're just being more efficient and safe overall. So I really can see that as a future possibility to just eliminate all of these negative consequences of operations.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, that's the future we need. Last question, and this one kind of puts you on the spot even a little bit more. I'd like to I'm just so interested in sort of how people have, view things differently, have divergent thinking. Can you tell me something that to be true that other people, most people, would actually disagree with you about from what you've seen?
Sure, that's a great question. I would say, something that I believe to be true, and maybe some people would disagree. I think that being, just as a person in general in life, being uncomfortable is a good thing. As human beings, we always strive to move towards comfort, right? And I think really stepping outside of that comfort zone and getting uncomfortable just leads to positive things, leads to positive changes. I went to Penn State. I'm a Penn State football fan, and there's something that the coach James Franklin said in a press conference once. He was talking about taking the program from being good, maybe even great, to going to be elite. And the process of doing that was, he said, if you're comfortable, you're never going to become elite. And he, in his position as the coach of that program, was very, very uncomfortable every day. And that was a good thing. And that's really kind of how I feel working at KCF. I put myself in some, somewhat uncomfortable positions, but ultimately it's led to positive change and growth for me professionally and personally. So that would be my answer to that question. Just strive to get uncomfortable.
Yeah, I love it. Failure leads to success and discomfort leads to comfort. It's kind of it's true, but it's not obvious. So I think it's very insightful. Well, I really appreciate it, Adam. This has been a great conversation. I hope that our people find this really interesting, because I know how much value there is in what you're doing, and I just really appreciate you sharing some of your stories, both from the power gen work and your work that you've been doing now. I'll start to just wrap it up there. Let me wrap it up by just first saying thanks to Marty again. So Marty, this will be our wrap up and exit for kind of your role in getting this thing off. So just thanks a lot, and
sure.
Any parting words for us?
Well, if I can just say that I'm as I listened to the entire interview, which was spectacular, what crossed my mind is I wish management guru Peter Drucker was here, and I wish W. Edwards Deming, the total quality management guru, was here to hear conversations like this about how you folks are in fact transforming American industry. And Jeremy, I'm just so delighted that you're part of the Business Builders Media platform. It's been an honor to work with you, and I'm looking forward to so many great shows you're going to be putting out in the future.
Marty, I really appreciate that. I appreciate you helping me get this started too, because it is, I think we didn't realize just how many great stories there are to share, and also how relatively easy it is. In fact, you mentioned some of those gurus of manufacturing. I've actually been dialoguing with one of the authors of that really pioneered the lean movement, and the author of the book Machine That Changed the World, Dan Jones. And those kind of people, I hope maybe we'll be able to get them on the show. So I appreciate that mention. So yeah, thanks, Marty. I really appreciate everything you've done with Business Builders Media and helping to get this industrial transformation podcast off the ground. Adam, I especially just appreciate you taking the time and sharing your stories and really your personal thoughts. Is there anything you'd like to share in closing with us?
No, I just would like to say thank you, Jeremy and Marty, for allowing me the opportunity to be on this show. I've really enjoyed it, and I've really enjoyed just working for you at KCF. And it's been a challenge, but it's been incredibly rewarding. I'm just looking forward to the future of what we can accomplish. So thank you.
That's great. Well, it's my treat and my pleasure being able to see you work, because you've just done an incredible amount in a relatively short time. So yeah, thank you for sharing this morning, and thank you for everything that you're doing and helping to share these stories. So this is Jeremy Frank, and it's the Industrial Transformation Podcast. Our guest this morning has been Adam Dalo, and we will get you next time. Thanks.
Thanks for listening to the Industrial Transformation Podcast, a production of Business Builders Media. Learn more about how KCF can help you on your industrial transformation journey at kcftech.com, and check out more shows on businessbuildersmedia.com.